Hi there, everyone. So we are now nearly 2 months on from CITES, the CITES Conference of the Parties in Uzbekistan. So we think it is long overdue that we gave everyone a bit of a roundup of some of the things that arose out of that Conference of the Parties. Um, we were there representing the pet trade for the European Pet Organisation, who very kindly provided us some support to go out and do some of that key work representing our industry. And no doubt some of you will have seen that we produced quite a bit of content over that week to just give everyone a bit of a flavour of what was going on over there. But for those of you that don't want to go trawling back through all those videos, here's some of the key highlights from the CITES CoP in Uzbekistan. So, firstly, captive breeding was covered across several different topics, and this is relevant to relevance to our sector because a lot of the CITES rules around captive breeding will affect species that are traded in the pet trade, and one thing that we've become quite concerned about is this idea that a lot of these rules around captive breeding become quite onerous and arguably disincentivize people from captive breeding, which is of course something that for some species is beneficial beneficial for conservation for those species to be captive bred rather than sourced to the wild. Of course, just a little caveat there, that's not true for all pet species, or certainly not true for all aquatic species because there are conservation benefits to wild caught. But for some species, you will want to incentivize captive breeding. Now, fortunately, there are several decisions that have come out of CITES which allow for us, the pet sector, to feed in our concerns and views around the captive breeding rules. And one of the key decisions coming out of that is for a technical workshop, much like what happened with the marine ornamental fishes a couple of years ago. And that technical workshop will allow us to attend and really get into some of the detail of why some of these what some of the problems with these captive breeding rules are, and come up with potential solutions, that kind of thing. So we'll be there to try and rationalize some of those captive breeding rules, but in addition, we also will be there to try and ward off more restrictions coming in from some of those organisations that are campaigning to make life more difficult for the pet trade. Second, stony corals. Now, this was an area that we'd worked really hard on over the past couple of years, really, with a number of other organisations such as Ornamental Fish International and Provision Reef in Australia. And one of the key concerns that we had was around the definitions within the CITES rules associated with trading stony corals. Now, those rules in particular, the definition for substrate could mean that effectively that substrate is reportable as well as the specimen that sits on top of it. So the bit of coral. So you could end up in a situation where, in theory, according to the rules, substrate might need a permit, but also the coral on top of it might need a permit. Now, whilst we expect that parties are likely to be pragmatic about this, it does create a lot of confusion for traders. So fortunately, we were able to secure through our intervention, we were able to secure a review process over the next couple of years to look at that definition of substrate, and hopefully our goal is to have substrate as a non-reportable term in CITES, because that would reduce a lot of confusion for people that are trying to import corals into the UK. There are some other concerns with the CITES rules around captive breeding, particularly there's a lack of definition around artificial materials, so like artificial rock, artificial bases, that kind of thing, which can look superficially similar to natural equivalents. But we're going to be working with some parties to come up with some guidance to help for law enforcement with that. And lastly, just wanted to touch on marine ornamental fishes. Now, this was one where we've already had a technical workshop which looked into a lot of aspects towards marine ornamental fishes, including a lot of the benefits of marine ornamental fisheries to both conservation and people in source countries, and really painting the picture that it's that you need to have evidence-led management if you are going to manage these fisheries, and blanket listing of species is not appropriate. Now, we weren't sure what to expect from this COP, and one thing that came up was a decision that encouraged parties to look at listing of marine ornamental fish species on Appendix 3. Now, in a way, parties are parties are free to list things on Appendix 3 at any time. Doesn't have to be at a COP. But it was a clear signal that some parties think that there is a need for listing of CITES species, despite the fact that the workshop said that more data collection is needed to inform proper management of these species. So one thing that we'll be doing over the next couple of years, and we have already made a start on this, is doing some key research and getting some preparation in place so that when those listings come down the line in 3 or 4 years' time in Panama, we are well prepared with a good bank of data to assess those listings and see whether or not they are appropriate. So those are some of the 3 headlines. There are lots of other aspects that we engaged on whilst we were in CITES COP, which you can have a look at some of our previous videos on. But for now, I'm going to sign off and say that's our roundup. And lastly, I'd like to give a shout out to all the other organisations that we worked with and collaborated with at CITES COP, both beforehand and during the COP itself. So thank you to Ornamental Fish International, European Pet Organisation, for giving us the support so we could attend. USARC, Pet Advocacy Network were instrumental and very helpful. Sustainable Users Network as well, colleagues at Repta in the UK, and many others as well who signed up to our joint positions. Big thanks to all of you that provided us key input. Oh, and of course, before I forget, thank you to Provision Reef as well for giving us some of the really useful expertise and contacts that we needed for that stony coral work. Thank you very much, and if you've got any questions, put a comment below.